an insight for me is that wherever I am, whatever industry, that people are motivated by purpose. They want to know that they make a difference. They want to know that they belong, that they matter, that their life counts. They want to see how when they show up every day to work, that it contributes to the purpose of the organization. They want to leave this place better than they found us.
You're listening to the High Purpose Leadership Podcast with Mike McCormick. Conversations from leaders to leaders in this post-pandemic age.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, Janine.
Hey, we're here today with Mike McCormick, the founder of High Purpose Practice. We're here to learn a little bit more about this company that he has started, specifically for leaders and organizations in our post-pandemic world and what to expect from this brand new podcast. So I'm really excited to dig into this. Mike, you and I haven't known each other for very long, but you and my husband have known each other since college. So that's been like 20 plus years.
Crazy. I know. And Scotty is a good friend, man. If there's ever a guy in this world who is the definition of a good friend, it is your husband. So I was so excited when you guys came to town the other day and we were able to grab some lunch, and then you started kind of picking my brain about what I've been thinking about and doing, and just how much that resonated with what you also are thinking about and doing. And this is really fun to be able to do it together.
Yeah. And it's so needed too. I think our conversation kind of kicked off because we started talking a little bit about the changes that are happening in companies and in ministries and just globally, how, there's new culture that's needed and new training and new skills. And so where do we go for that? How do we find that? How do we equip for this even up and coming generation of leaders? And so I love that conversation, and that kind of sparked and spiraled us to partnership together. So I love that. And I'm so excited about this podcast. I think it really is timely. And I think that a lot of people are really going to enjoy this. So, Mike, I know you have an incredible personal story about kind of what sparked your outlook for purpose in life. And so tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. I love talking about what I do, but why I do is probably even more important. So when I was 7 years old, my brother Mark actually was diagnosed with leukemia. And about a year later, he ended up passing away. And I can remember being part of the funeral, and then some of the support groups that actually my mom had put together. And one of the guys who also had cancer at that time, his name was Kenny Hagar, about 16 years old. He had cancer, and then he got better. And while he was in remission, he produced a little notebook of all the things that he wanted to do in his life. And I can remember this cover of the notebook, and it had this clouds and said Kenny Hagar's dreams. And I remember flipping through that and seeing all the things that Kenny wanted to do with his life. And then about a year or so after that, he actually relapsed, and he ended up passing away. And I can remember just praying to God, actually saying, Lord, I don't understand why my brother or Kenny, why they have to go. I didn't understand that. I said, and I actually don't even really understand why I'm still here, but I made a commitment to God that day that whatever time I had on this earth and how short it was, that I was going to use it to make a difference. And in some ways, help live out some of those dreams and aspirations that Kenny or maybe my brother were never had the opportunity to fulfill. So that really early kind of set me on a path that was pretty focused and really a sense of discovery and curiosity about, what is my purpose, right? Why am I here? And what I came to realize over the, last several years was that the thing that I really enjoy doing the most, and the thing that I seem to get the best feedback on as far as being most helpful, is that I love finding other people that have a sense of purpose, other high purpose people who have a sense of calling and purpose, and helping to lift them up so that they can really accomplish their purpose. And sometimes that means one-on-one with individuals. Sometimes it means groups of people like teams, or sometimes it's, entire organizations, and carving out strategy and their leadership capacity to accomplish that. But it really comes down to the same thing as just lifting up leaders to help them, accomplish their their great purpose. So yeah, it's been a good ride so far.
Yeah. And I love that it's purpose focused, which I think is a very big distinction between just like a leadership podcast or any sort of leadership training, because a lot of times there is an influx of information out there that you can find on how to be a good leader. But at the end of it, I think what's so powerful about your story is that it's purpose driven, that even at such a young age, you recognize the importance of our time here on earth. And what do we all wish at the end of our life? That it meant something, right?
Yeah.
And not just accomplishing great goals or, being able to say I was a CEO of a great company, but really to have lasting impressions. And so I love that it's not what you're going after. It's not just equipping people for leading well, but it's to say, what is your purpose? And
Yeah.
then, man, let's help you get to that and come alongside. And that's what I love so much. Tell us a little bit about kind of your experience so far. Like, what's your background and what have you done already?
Yeah, I love how you just said that about equipping people, but really equipping people for service and that sense of purpose. And so, about 20 years of my professional life has been in the local church, being a pastor, and I've served in large mega churches, and I've also served. Right now, I'm in Kentucky, where we have kind of a conglomerate of smaller, more rural churches, even all the way out into eastern Kentucky. So, kind of the full spectrum on the church front. And then about 10 years ago, I started a leadership development program in our local church. That time we were going multi-site, and we could raise the money and we could buy the property, but our leaders were not able to advance at the pace, keep pace with our other part of our growth. So I went back to school and got my doctorate for leadership development and started doing that in the church. And as part of that, I reached out to a friend of mine, John Procari, who was at the church at the time, and he did it professionally, commercially. So I asked him if he would help me do it in the church, and he said yes. And it was working, and we were having a great time doing it together. And he said, "Mike, hey, you're pretty good at this. Would you want to do it outside the church?" And I said, "Well, I wasn't planning on that, but sure, I'd love to." And that kind of got me out into the business world and into the corporate world, and largely into healthcare. I started working with Johns Hopkins University, some of the state universities, worked with St. Jude Hospital. So a lot of, again, kind of sometimes larger hospital systems, but also where I am now, some smaller rural community-based hospitals. But whether it's in the church ministry world, whether it's in healthcare, whether it's working with nonprofits like Refuge for Women or Young Life, whether it's sort of local ministries, homeless shelters, or even manufacturing and people who are producing materials, but just everybody is those audiences, teachers, schools, they're all trying to serve a purpose. They all have a cause that's greater than themselves. And these days, there's a lot of great things to lead out there, but the ones that seem to matter most are the ones that have a sense of purpose. And what's ironic about this is this next generation is really sold on the idea of purpose. There's got to be a double bottom line. We understand that, money is part of making a living and part of keeping an organization going. But there's got to be this other bottom line of purpose, not just profit, but purpose. And so this is part of, I think, what makes what we're doing a little bit different and a little bit unique, is that we are really going after leaders who have that sense of purpose. They're serving a purpose bigger than themselves, and they're wanting to bring people along to accomplish that great purpose.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that your experience really crosses a lot of the spectrum, across the board. And so it's not really just an expertise in one specific area, but you've had your hand in multiple different areas in the professional realm. And so what you're bringing even to the podcast and the leaders that you're bringing under the podcast, they speak across the board. And so this isn't just, like one person being like, well, that industry doesn't apply to me, right? And so a lot of the principles and the heart and the purpose that you're going to be talking about, I love that. I love that, it is not, it doesn't exclude anyone, like really
Yeah.
anybody. Listen to this.
It's actually funny because I think earlier in my life, I would have thought they were pretty different games. And certainly, there's differences between nonprofit and for profit, and there's pace differences and structure differences. But at the end of the day, whether it's for profit, nonprofit, whether it's been here in the United States or whether it's been developing leaders internationally in countries like Australia or Sri Lanka, where I've been, at the end of the day, people are people.
Yeah.
And the way we, are motivated and the way that we work together, the way we relate to one another, those are pretty standard. I think God has designed, the human soul to be a certain way, and it really doesn't matter what arena you're playing in. Some of those things are transferable,
Yeah.
and so that's what been actually an insight for me is that wherever I am, whatever industry, that people are motivated by purpose. They want to know that they make a difference. They want to know that they belong, that they matter, that their life counts. They want to see how when they show up every day to work, that it contributes to the purpose of the organization. They want to leave this place better than they found it. So those are some principles that seem to transcend those different types of organizations. And I love working with those kind of people wherever they are.
Yeah. I know a big buzzword right now, obviously, is the Great Resignation. And what's interesting is kind of the shift of, the perspective before has been what can people give to the company and the vision of the company. But now there's this shift of, man, what are people individually called to? What do their hearts connect with? And I think that what we've seen is that's a pain point for a lot of organizations. So speak to that a little bit. Why do you think this is happening, and what will this podcast even, how will that kind of address some of those concerns and the change?
That's a great question, and it does get to the point of why we're doing this right now. So I was reading a Fast Company article, and they were talking about the Great Resignation, saying there are some practical reasons for that. Some are health reasons. Some people are still not comfortable maybe working out in public, so they like the home atmosphere, want to transfer there. Some of it's family related. You got a lot of young parents. We can relate to this, where you got your kids and you're trying to juggle some of the uncertainty, and so it's not just you, but it's also your family dynamics that you're trying to balance. So some people are reconfiguring that. But Fast Company magazine said the third and most powerful part of this is kind of an existential crisis that people are in, where they're really they've seen suffering, they've seen death, they're grieving the loss of people and things in their life. It's so much disruption that it's causing them to say, why? Why am I doing this? What am I going to reinvest my life in now that things are sort of picking back up? And I don't want to just get back on the hamster wheel and go through the motions anymore. I really want my life to make basically my story, that many people are having that same thing. They see how short life is, and they want to make it count, So that's the good news, is that there are many people out there who are trying to figure this out. It's kind of a recalculating of their life and their purpose, and finding that redirection. The challenge right now is that it is a crisis. That if you talk to when I talk with CEOs of hospitals, when I talk with principals of schools, superintendents of school districts, when I talk to pastors of churches, psychiatrists who are dealing with mental health, they're all saying the same thing. There's just not enough. There's just not enough of us trying to meet the needs of all these. There's just not enough people who are willing to serve these purposes and these causes that we have in front of us. And so there's a weariness that's happening right now. For many people who have led through the crisis, they have actually picked up sort of like seems to me like secondhand trauma. They've been working and serving people on the front lines, and now they need a place to go where they can kind of recover and process what just happened and refresh themselves. So, that's part of why I want to do this podcast. One, to bring a broader exposure to a ton of the good work and good people that are out there doing great things. But also to do it right now, because I think that there's a sense of, people feeling fragile or uncertain about themselves, or just tired. And the statement I hear the most, that's most encouraging, is when people hear another person, another leader share something, and they say, "It's just good to know that I'm not alone.
Yeah.
It's just good to know that I'm not alone." And that sense of connection that people have with another leader, and that they can feel that same frustration or get a great idea that they hadn't thought of on their own. So I really think now's like a great time for shifting to a community of leaders where we can kind of learn from each other, support one another. And I hope this podcast will move us in that direction.
Amazing. So what can people expect to hear from? Who can they expect to hear from? And kind of throw some topics to give the audience a little bit of a taste of what's to come.
Yeah. So over the last several years, through the pandemic, before, through it, and now on this side of it, I've been working with really amazing leaders, and I am so encouraged every time I get off a call or run a meeting with them to think, man, they are just knocking it out of the park right now, and other people need to be able to hear this. So the thought for this podcast is to bring on some of those leaders that I've been working with and tell their story and hear this unique niche and kind of perspective that they bring, some challenges and some solutions that they're coming up with to invite other people into those same conversations and provide some resource. So we're going to be talking about things like mental health. One of the big coming out of the pandemic was that mental health was sort of a behind the closet conversation. And now it's more like a kitchen table conversation. We're all wrestling in some ways with it, or we know someone who is. A lot of our families, a lot of children, a lot of leaders are really struggling with mental health right now. And so we need to be able to put that on the table and talk about what that looks like and how to navigate for yourself or maybe for someone that you love. We're going to talk about the weariness of leaders and what we can be doing as a leader to care for ourselves and to care for other leaders. We can't just assume right now that people are operating on full tanks, that many people are running on empty. So what are some strategies for kind of being healthy healers, right? How do we provide a safe place for our people and leaders around us to really be reviving and growing, and some solutions that people are coming up with? I actually talked to a CEO the other day. He said 30% of their strategic plan, 30% of their strategic plan had to do with reinvesting in their people, because he knew that workplace culture was so important if they were going to keep people at work. So we're talking about retention, engagement, how to keep people employed and running on a full tank, right? We're going to talk about teaming. This is one of the most important shifts, I think, that's needed to come out of the pandemic is what's a sustainable model for leadership? And we all can look back over the last several years of eras where leaders were kind of heroic leaders, where they would become the point person and take on the world on their shoulders. And we admired and respected and wanted to be a lot of those leaders who we just thought, man, they're amazing what they can do, inspirational, visionaries, drawing people to them. And they built big organizations. They built big churches. They built hospitals. They built big schools, right? But what we're seeing all around is those leaders are starting to crack and starting to cave, and the weight is starting to get too heavy. And a lot of those leaders had created systems or organizations where the leadership culture is going to have to shift. And that shift's going to be more toward a team approach, a shared leadership approach, where you can share weight, responsibility, and all know that you're pulling for the same purpose. So we're going to talk about that kind of sustainability and what does it take to team with people? What are the challenges? It's a different way to lead. It's not necessarily a right or wrong, but it's definitely different. And I think it's needed for this time. I do think it's the right time for that style. So we'll talk about team leadership there. We'll talk about some issues related to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. We are all growing in our realization that we don't all see the world just like everybody else, and that we have to grow. If we're going to team, we need perspectives that are different than our own. And we all have blind spots. We all have a certain experience that we come from, that we pull from, and that the world is much bigger than any one of us. So, what does that look like to really create a space where everyone feels welcome, where people really feel like they belong, where you take a hard look at the leadership table where you're serving and you say, who's not here, or who are we intentionally or unintentionally keeping out, and asking some of those hard questions to really build a a more welcoming environment for leadership communities. Those are some of the kind of things. There's a lot that we want to look at with this next generation that's coming up and some of the unique challenges. And so we're going to talk to some folks who work with kids and young people so we can get some generational trends and seeing what leadership might look like. That's going to probably be different than, even you or I might think of. So we're going to kind of explore some of the next generation topics as well. Leadership succession planning. Those all become important topics as we think about the culture changes around us. So those are some of the things. And thankfully, we've got experts other than me who are working in all of those areas. And I'm so grateful that I've been able to learn from them. And I feel like I'm a better person from some of those relationships. So I'm looking forward to having them on the show.
Yeah. So we're going to be listening and hearing from a lot of different people. So very excited about what's to come and who we're going to have on the show. And I'm personally looking forward to it and learning from you and all of these experts in the field. So excited about this podcast. Mike, do you have anything else that you want to share before we sign off?
No, I'm grateful for this opportunity and looking forward to, like I say, building a leadership community. I think now more than ever is a time where none of us should be leading alone. So hopefully we all have places and people in our own locality where we're starting to build those leadership communities. And this place can be a space where we can come and think through those ideas and make our own communities even stronger.
Awesome. Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today who's listening to this, and be sure to share it with your friends, your family, and you'll be hearing from Mike very soon.
Thanks for listening to the High Purpose Leadership Podcast with Mike McCormick. For more information, visit highpurposepractice.com.